यच्चेजितश्वासो ब्रह्मबीजम् अविस्मरन् अभ्यसेन मनसा शुद्धं त्रिवृद्ब्रह्माक्षरं परं मनो यच्चेजितश्वासो ब्रह्मबीजम् अविस्मरन् अभ्यसेन मनसा शुद्धं त्रिवृद्ब्रह्माक्षरं परं मनो यच्चेजितश्वासो ब्रह्मबीजम् अविस्मरन् अभ्यसेन मनसा शुद्धं त्रिवृद्ब्रह्माक्षरं परं मनो यच्चेजितश्वासो ब्रह्मबीजम् अविस्मरन् अभ्यसेन मनसा शुद्धं त्रिवृद्ब्रह्माक्षरं परं मनो यच्चेजितश्वासो ब्रह्मबीजम् अविस्मरन्. Word to word meaning. Abhyaset, one should practice. Manasa, by the mind. Shuddham, sacred. Trivrit, composed of the three. Brahmaksharam, transcendental letters. Param, the supreme. Manaha, mind. Yachet, get under control. Jitashvasaha, by regulating the breathing air. Brahma, absolute. Bijam, seed. Avismaran, without being forgotten. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. After sitting in the above manner, making the mind remember the three transcendental letters A, U and Ma, and by regulating the breathing process, control the mind so as not to forget the transcendental seed. Please repeat this translation. After sitting in the above manner, make the mind remember the three transcendental letters A, U and Ma, and by regulating the breathing process, control the mind so as not to forget the transcendental seed. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Omkara or the Pranava is the seed of transcendental realization, and it is composed of the three transcendental letters A, U and Ma. By its chanting by the mind, in conjunction with the breathing process, which is a transcendental but mechanical way of getting into trance, as devised by the experience of great mystics, one is able to bring the mind, which is materially absorbed, under control. This is the way of changing the habit of the mind. The mind is not to be killed. Mind or desire cannot be stopped, but to develop a desire to function for spiritual realization, the quality of engagement by the mind has to be changed. The mind is the pivot of the active sense organs, and as such, if the quality of thinking, feeling and willing is changed, naturally, the quality of actions by the instrumental senses will also change. Omkara is the seed of all transcendental sound, and it is only the transcendental sound which can bring about the desired change of the mind and the senses. Even a mentally deranged man can be cured by treatment of transcendental sound. In the Bhagavad-gita, the Pranava, Omkara, has been accepted as the direct, literal representation of the Supreme Absolute Truth. One who is not able to chant directly the holy name of the Lord, as recommended above, can easily chant the Pranava Omkara. This Omkara is a note of address such as, O my Lord, just as Om Hari Om means, O my Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As we have explained before, the Lord's holy name is identical with the Lord Himself. So also is Omkara. But persons who are unable to realize the transcendental personal form or name of the Lord on account of their imperfect senses, in other words, the neophytes, are trained to the practice of self-realization by this mechanical process of regulating the breathing function and simultaneously repeating the pranava, Omkara, within the mind. As we have several times expressed, since the transcendental name, form, attributes, pastimes, etc. of the personality of Godhead are impossible to understand with the present material senses, it is necessary that through the mind, the center of sensual activities, such transcendental realization be set into motion. The devotees directly fix their mind on the person of the absolute truth, but one who is unable to accommodate such personal features of the absolute is disciplined in impersonality to train the mind to make further progress. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So here, what is being explained by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit is the reply to a question of Maharaj Parikshit, where in response to that question by Maharaj Parikshit, Shukadeva Goswami is giving the example of King Khatwanga, who was able to immediately take shelter of the Supreme Lord in just a moment. So here, the importance of remembering the Supreme Lord at the time when one is about to leave his body has been explained. And after that, Shukadeva Goswami is explaining what one has to do during one's lifetime so that he is able to remember the Lord at the time he is leaving this body. So, beginning with verse 15 and till this verse and some of the ensuing verses, what all a person needs to do to remember the Supreme Lord at the time that he has to leave his body is being explained. So in the previous two verses, which is verse number 15 and 16, Shukadeva Goswami is talking about gross renunciation. That is, he is talking about how one has to cut off all attachments to the material body and everything pertaining to it and all desires thereof. And in the next verse he says one has to leave his home, practice self-control, and in a sacred place he should bath regularly and sit down in a lonely place duly sanctified. Now in this verse, after having spoken in the previous verses about controlling the senses, Here, Shukadeva Goswami is talking about controlling of the mind. And he is giving a process. He says, Abhyasena manasa shuddham. That is, by a certain practice, Abhyaset manasa shuddham. You should make the mind sacred or pure. How one has to do that? By remembering the three transcendental letters, Trivrit Brahmaksharam Param. By remembering the three letters A, U and Ma, Om, and Mano Yache Jita Shwaso, and by controlling the breathing air, Jita Shwasaha. And what is the purpose of doing all this? It is to not forget the transcendental seed. So, in several places in the Bhagavad-gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam also, this process of controlling the mind by the mechanical process of Hatha Yoga has been mentioned. So, in the third canto, it is mentioned how you first control the incoming breath by the process of Puraka, and then you hold the breath. This process is called Kumbhaka, and then you exhale, that is called Rechaka. And by doing all this, what happens? The two nerves, Ida and Pingala, through which the incoming breath and outgoing breath goes, they become purified. And by this mechanical process, all the material contamination which is there, that also gets purified, and then the practitioner of Hatha Yoga is able to meditate on the transcendental sound Om. So this is the process of Ashtanga Yoga. It has been described in the Bhagavad-gita also and in the Srimad-Bhagavatam also. But as Prabhupada is pointing out in this purport, that this process is not practical and this process is not easy for us to practice. So if somebody is able to take to the process, direct process of Bhakti Yoga, then it is much more easy to remember the Supreme Lord at the time when one is leaving his body. So this understanding that Bhakti Yoga is much more simpler than other forms of yoga, and that it is the process more suited for this age is a common understanding. When we meet many people, they also admit that even though there are so many processes, this process of Bhakti Yoga is very simple and very easy. But what many people don't understand is that Bhakti Yoga also requires abhyasa or practice. It is not merely some sentiment or some emotion which can directly be expressed and then one makes progress. Of course, bhakti is something which is naturally there. Krishna also says that in the Padma Purana it is said, Atashri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Grahyam Indriyair Sevon Mukehi Jihvado Swayam Eva Sfuratyadaha. So automatically this bhakti for the Supreme Lord which is there within us can be awakened. Bhakti is there within us and it has to be awakened. But for it to be awakened, there is a process. And that process is Sevon Mukehi Jihvado. Sevon Mukehi Jihvado. That is, one has to start the process of service beginning with the tongue. So even though we have a natural relationship with Krishna, Krishna consciousness is naturally there within us, it has to be awakened by a certain discipline, by a certain process. So in the Bhagavad-gita also, Krishna is making a reference to this in a couple of places. First, in the 8th chapter, Krishna says that, in 8.8, he says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa na anyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan. He says, he who meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. So here, the word Abhyasa Yogena is used. That is, by practice of remembering the Supreme Lord. So this is something which is not natural to us now, but it has to be practiced. And then in the 12th chapter also Krishna says that so in the 12th chapter, when Arjuna is asking this question to Krishna, which process is better, whether fixing my mind on your personal form or to worship the impersonal or the unmanifested Brahman, Krishna says there is no doubt that meditating on my personal form is the highest. And then he goes on to mention the process by which one can come to that state of always meditating on the Supreme Lord. So there Krishna says that if someone is always meditating upon the Lord and has his mind fixed upon him, then for him Krishna is the swift deliverer from the process of birth and death. And therefore he says, Mayeva mana adatsva mayi buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayeva ata urdvam na samshayaha. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. But then Krishna goes on to say, Atachittam samadhatum nashaknoshi mayi sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mami chaptum dhananjaya. My dear O Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, you will develop a desire to attain to me. So, from all this, what we understand is that the ultimate goal of our life, if we want to be freed from the process of birth and death, Shri Krishna Rukmini Satyabhama ki, Krishna Balram ki, Gaur Nitai ki jai. As Parikshit Maharaj is also desiring here, is to fix our mind on Lord Krishna. But this fixing our mind on Lord Krishna and always remembering his pastimes is not possible for the materially conditioned soul. In fact, Prabhupada points out in one of the lectures or in one of the conversations, he said that in the Bhagavad-gita, when Arjuna is taking the position of a materially disturbed person, even though Arjuna is a pure devotee, he is put into forgetfulness by Lord Krishna, and therefore Arjuna is taking the position of a person in material anxiety, who is completely absorbed in material consciousness. So Prabhupada is pointing out that Krishna is not explaining to Arjuna his leelas or his pastimes or his dealings with the gopis. That is not what Krishna is describing to Arjuna. Krishna is explaining to Arjuna the basics of Bhakti Yoga. That you are not the body, you are the soul. You have to regulate your mind. This mind is not the mind, if it is not controlled, it is your enemy. And only if you control it, it is your friend. And then he describes the different processes by which one can come to the point of remembrance of Krishna. So what Krishna is also explaining to Arjuna is the process of regulated devotional service or abhyasa or sadhana bhakti. But we see that bhakti generally is understood as going to some kalakshepa, performing some bhajana, attending some saptaham. But some regular practice is something which people don't associate often with the process of bhakti. But here we see that in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is talking about a regular practice. This regular practice is very important for one to come to the stage of bhakti. There are different stages which Prabhupada points out. He says in the first stage, the mind is fully materially contaminated. It has fully materially absorbed, it has so many material desires, and in this position, it is not possible for one to render devotional service. So the first stage that one has to undergo is one has to purify the mirror of the mind, clear the dust of the mind by the process of chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So when we start chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, then what happens? The dust of the mind gets cleared, and the first symptom that the dust of the mind is getting cleared is what? One is freed from all material hankering and lamentation. So many times people, they say they are performing bhakti, they are performing devotional service, they are going to different temples, but still they are not able to develop detachment. They are still attached to so many things, which means they have still not come, they are not still free from the material concept of life. So the symptom of freedom from the material concept of life is that na shochati na kankshati. One is free from hankering and lamentation. There is no more desire that I need this thing, I need this thing. And at the same time, there is no lamentation when one loses something. So this is the stage which is called the Brahma Bhuta platform. Brahma Bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshati. One is free from all material hankering and lamentation. So then when one comes to this stage, then actually our devotional service begins. Brahma Bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. So this is the stage on which our real devotional service begins. So without coming to this platform of Brahma Bhuta platform, it is not possible to come to the platform of devotional service. This remembrance of Krishna will not always be there with us. Because devotional service is performed only when the mind is completely undisturbed. Only when one is adhira, when one is completely undisturbed. And who is adhira? Krishna says, one who understands that he is not the body, he is the spirit soul, he is adhira. One who is Brahma Bhuta, who has realized he is not the body, he is the spirit soul. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatrana muhyati. Therefore, only a person who is completely undisturbed by the bodily or the mental inconveniences, he can actually engage himself in devotional service. One may be thinking that he is doing devotional service, but if he is seeing that he is still disturbed by bodily inconveniences, then one has to understand that my practice of devotional service is one, either it is not the correct process, or second, it is not being sufficiently performed. So it is a great science, devotional service. It is not merely some sentiment or some feeling. It is a science. So one can clearly measure whether one is performing devotional service or not by seeing how much undisturbed or how much one is not being inconvenienced by mental and physical disturbances. So if one is still having mental and physical disturbances, then what is the solution for that? One has to check what is the process one is following. So devotional service has to be performed only under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. It is not something which can be whimsically done. Aikantiki harer bhakti utpata eva kalpate. If somebody thinks that one can perform devotional service without coming under the guidance of a spiritual master, without following rules and regulations, then what will it result in? It will result only in disturbance. So first thing is one has to practice this devotional service under the guidance of a spiritual master by following all the rules and regulations. And second thing, one has to do it regularly as a matter of discipline. Just like if one wants to become a good singer, it is not naturally that one becomes a good singer. One has to practice. First you have to know the talas, then you have to know the ragas, then notes. So many different things are there. And when one practices, then naturally one is able to sing. This is true of almost everything. That is true of devotional service also. even though devotional service is naturally there within us, it has to be awakened by the process of sadhana bhakti. And how this has to be awakened, this science is taught to us by the spiritual master. So, whether one is a brahmachari or one is a grihastha, the principles are the same. The principle is that one has to take the shelter of a pure devotee, and under his direction, we have to perform all our activities. So this is called guided devotional service. And in this process, we are able to see and measure for ourselves what progress we are making. Because if ultimately we have to come to the platform of remembering Krishna at the time of death, then even before that, in the course of our natural activities, we should see whether we are able to remember Krishna. If in the course of our devotional service itself we are experiencing so many disturbances, which is not helping us perform our devotional activities, then there is no way that we will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. Prabhupada points this out. If you are unable to remember Krishna at the time when you are performing your regular activities, then how can you remember Krishna at the time of death? So all these activities which are given to us by the spiritual master is given for two reasons. One, it is for completely engaging our mind and senses in Krishna. And second thing, it is for us also to introspect and check whether we are able to remember Krishna in the course of performing our duties. Many times when we are performing our devotional activities, we are not able to remember Krishna because of so many disturbances. So that is the time for us to introspect and try to understand why we are unable to remember. And we will understand that it is because we are not performing our sadhana bhakti sufficiently. As a matter of daily practice, our reading, our chanting, because we are not doing sufficiently, because we are not carrying out our assigned duties sufficiently, in accordance with the instruction of the spiritual master, we are unable to remember Krishna even during the course of performing our assigned tasks. So therefore, this process which Prabhupada has given us is a process to remember Krishna, and also a process by which we are able to gauge for ourselves how much we are progressing in our spiritual life. So, this process of Bhakti Yoga, even though it is a direct process, even though it is much more simpler than other process of yoga, this also requires a regular practice, which has to be done day after day. Just like in the process of pranayama, there are 8 stages. Similarly, in the process of bhakti also, to come to the ultimate platform of love for Godhead, there are different stages which the acharyas have given. It starts with faith, which is called Shraddha. We have faith that by following this process, we will achieve the ultimate goal of life. And then after we develop this faith, we start associating with devotees who are following this process. And this process is called Sadhu Sangha. And by associating with devotees, we understand from them what is the process we need to follow. And when we have faith in this process, we also start performing these activities under the guidance of a pure devotee or a spiritual master. And this is called Bhajana Kriya. So this Sadhu Sangha and Bhajana Kriya, when it is done regularly, in a regulated manner, then it results in Anartha Nivritti. This Anartha Nivritti is only removal of all the material contaminations that we have, which is not allowing us to remember Krishna always. This is the stage of Anartha Nivritti. So this anartha nivritti, when it happens sufficiently, then we come to the platform of nishtha. Nishtha means our faith becomes very, very strong, that this process that we are following is correct, and we become more enthusiastic in carrying out devotional service. That is, we develop taste for these activities. So in the beginning, when we are doing bhajana kriya, there is no taste. The chanting we are doing as a matter of duty, even though there is no taste. The assigned tasks to us we do as a matter of duty, even though there is no taste. But because we have faith in the words of the spiritual master and we keep doing and doing and doing, what happens is, slowly we become more convinced about this and we start developing a taste for these activities. It no longer becomes just a duty, but we develop taste and attachment for these activities. We become more and more eager to perform more and more devotional service. So this symptom, when a sadhaka develops eagerness for devotional service, at that stage, slowly he comes to the stage of attachment, which is asakti, and then he comes to the stage of bhava or prema, when he's developing feelings of devotion towards the Lord. So these are different goalposts in the life of a sadhaka, and therefore, until we come to the stage of asakti, until we come to the state of ruchi, we have to be doing all our assigned services, our sadhana, as a matter of duty, as a matter of abhyasa, as a matter of practice. So this is something which Prabhupada has instituted for us, where we understand that we are, first of all, not on the Brahmabhuta platform. By reading Prabhupada's books, we understand that we are on the conditioned stage of life, and therefore we are not on the platform where we are able to remember Krishna. And because we are not on that platform, we are performing all these activities as a matter of duty to come to that stage where ultimately we will be able to remember Krishna. So just like in the process of Ashtanga Yoga also, we have to control our senses and control our mind so that the quality of our thinking, feeling and willing of the mind is changing. Similarly, in Bhakti Yoga also, when we regularly read Prabhupada's books, when we regularly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, when we regularly carry out our assigned duties, what we start experiencing is that there is a change in the way we think, there is a change in the way we feel, and there is a change in the way we are acting. Our thinking, feeling, willing, acting, all these start gradually changing. So our process is not one of stopping activity or stopping thinking. Our activity is one of changing the quality of our thinking, changing the quality of our willing, and changing the quality of our acting. It is not one of stopping our actions. Our process is one of spiritualizing all our actions, spiritualizing our thoughts, spiritualizing our actions. And all this is possible by simply following this process of Bhakti Yoga. So without this process, following this process, what happens is that we sometimes attend some satsang, we sometimes go for some saptaham, we sometimes do some reading, but because it is not done as an abhyasa, as a regular practice, a person is not able to come to the platform of Brahmabhuta. A person continues to be disturbed by the material disturbances caused. But when one is practicing this abhyasa yoga, it is very easy to overcome all material disturbances. The state of samadhi which is being described here, at one place Prabhupada is talking about that state, that Yeah, in the beginning of the purport, by its chanting, by the mind, in conjunction with the breathing process, which is transcendental but mechanical way of getting into trance, one is able to bring the mind which is materially absorbed under control. So, this process of trance, which Prabhupada describes, is the state where one is not disturbed even in the midst of the greatest difficulty, which is defined in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita as samadhi. Once one attains this state of trance, one is never disturbed even in the midst of greatest difficulty. And only when one comes to this platform where one is not disturbed even in the midst of greatest difficulty, that one can start performing devotional service. So, this test of whether one can perform devotional service, one can remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death, can be gauged by how much undisturbed we are when we are carrying out even our so-called material duties in this world. So therefore, it is very important that we take to this process of Abhyasa Yoga, this process of sadhana bhakti, regulated devotional service, by which we are able to spiritualize our senses, spiritualize our mind, and see whether we are able to overcome all the material disturbances which come across our way when we are performing our material duties, so that at the time when the biggest material disturbance, which is death, approaches us, we are undisturbed. We are able to think of the Lord at that point of time. Anta kale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. At that point of time, when we are leaving the body, if we are able to remember the Lord, then at that time only we will be ready to overcome this repeated process of birth and death. So this is the process which Shukadeva Goswami is explaining to Parikshit Maharaj. When Parikshit Maharaj is having only 7 days to live and he wants to perfect his life, this is the process which Shukadeva Goswami is giving to Parikshit Maharaj. And this is the same process which Krishna is also explaining to Arjuna in the Bhagavad-gita. And this is the same process which we also need to follow, by which we can also overcome this process of birth and death. I'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki.